Hi there. Well, forgive my lack of advanced technology here. I'm using a laptop cam for lack of anything more advanced at this point. My name's Kurt Meyer, not to be confused with Kurt Weigel, the guy who's pretty much famous for doing reviews of games on the net. Anyway, this is my first attempt at this sort of deal, but bear with me. I'm going to be talking about this book today. We have Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls by Ken St. Andre. Just a little bit of background on Tunnels and Trolls. This was the second RPG ever created. Ken St. Andre tells a story about how he was attending a friend's game night, and everybody was busy playing Risk, and someone at the party had purchased the then new Dungeons and Dragons white box, and so he thought, well, great, this is a good time to read Dungeons and Dragons. And he said he read through it and didn't understand it, so he spent few days researching some books he got out of the library, and then proceeded to write his own game, created his own game, handed it off to his friends, and his friends proceeded to edit it. Long story short, he eventually ends up with a 30-page document that becomes the first edition of Tunnels and Trolls. Now, that was 41 years ago. That was 1975. This book is 386 pages, I believe. It's a fantastic book. The production value here, this is really great. This is a great hardcover book. The paper quality in this book is very nice. I apologize if you can't really see. Yeah, the paper quality is quite nice. And this is, of course, showing my age. I'm essentially a few months older than Tunnels and Trolls. And one of the aspects of this, the physical book that I appreciate, is the fonts. It's a really easy book to read. Really good line spacing. Not that a lot of people think about that. But as I was saying, the initial game, Tunnels and Trolls First Edition 75, was somewhere around 30 pages. This is 386 pages, so you might be thinking, well, damn, why the expansion? Why this much detail? At its core, Tunnels and Trolls, the actual game, probably the core rules is essentially about 30 pages in length, even in this version. Everything else is options, explanation, discussion, and a tremendous world section. And one thing about this game that is sort of important to note is that it's one of the few games, in fact, the only one that I can name offhand, that has had the same creative team at its helm for 41 years. Palladium, of course, comes close with Kevin Siembieda releasing his house rules for D&D, which became the Palladium system. I believe his first edition was 83. This is 75, and it is not a D&D derived game. Again, because Ken St. Andre said when he read through D&D, he initially didn't understand it. So he wanted to create something that was a lot more accessible. And what you have here, it's sort of the genius of this game, is that you basically have two opposing sides in a combat round, adding up various numbers of totals of die rolls, and then comparing that total, the difference being the total damage done to whichever side loses. Now that sounds really simple, and it is at its core, but there's a whole lot of nuances that you can affect with this game. It's incredibly easy to house rule, and in effect, this can become a narrative game without originally intending to be. An adept GM can grab a couple calculators, a die rolling app, so on and so forth, and mess with the math, play with the numbers, and just kind of narrate to the players what happens. So that's, and another thing about this game that really brings it back to the early days of RPGs is that you've essentially got three classes, three archetypes. You've got wizards, warriors, and rogues. Okay, these are the archetypes of fantasy RPGing. In fact, Michael Wolff, the great stargazer from Stargazer's blog, created a game called Warrior Rogue Mage that in fact had those as the only attributes for the characters, because that's so iconic to fantasy gaming. But basically each archetype, all it really means in game terms is that it gives you a slight advantage in a particular area. In fact, warriors get a tremendous combat advantage. Wizards get a discounted spell cost. Spells work on a system in this version. They work off an attribute called wizardry, which is a departure from the now classic 1978 5th edition, which is the edition that was kind of standard for over 20 years. That sapped strength from characters. This one, you have an attribute that gets sapped and so forth. But I'm just kind of rambling at this point. I'm going to kind of curtail that a bit and get back to my initial point, which is this game. The rogue, of course, is talented. The rogue relies on a whole lot on luck, which is an additional attribute to the sort of classical 6 from D&D. Tunnels and Trolls will add luck, and as I said, wizardry to its variation on the traditional 6. The game, other than the combat that I described, essentially runs on a saving throw mechanism. It's again, I'm not really a math person, but it's easy math, so it's level of the saving throw, or difficulty level of the saving throw, times 5 plus 15, and that's going to equal the number and then you're going to subtract that from your character's current attribute value, whatever the attribute is it's being tested, most likely luck, right? And then you're going to have to roll under that on 2 die. Roll over that on 2 dice. And TNT allows for exploding dice. So if you get doubles, your die roll explodes, and so on and so forth. This game is really infinitely adaptable, and the fact that it's been around for 41 years kind of speaks to that. There's people have published their house rules in various forms. There was at one time there was a superhero version, Power Trip. There's been a post-apocalyptic version. There is a space version, and so the game's been around. One of the things that I really like about this game, and have always liked about it, is that you can throw a monster out there with essentially only one game stat, that game stat being the monster rating. Basically, you figure out how many dice you want the monster to roll, you multiply that by 10, and add 1, and that's the monster's monster rating. So, the thing about that, and then, of course, that I don't want to get into more technical stuff about the game, because that's going to spoil some of the fun, I suppose, but what this is going to do is it's going to give you it indicate all you need is essentially that number to indicate the creature's effectiveness in combat. So what that does is that frees up the GM's imagination to create any number of just random, amazingly bizarre and unexpected creatures for his or her players to encounter. It's worth mentioning that one of the expansions in this, and this has kind of been standard for TNT for a long time, although they tweak it quite a bit in the Deluxe edition, is that you can actually, I counted something like 48 different species that you can be, that your character can be in here, and there's actually a description, paragraph or more description for each one. So you're kind of getting an idea of what you can do. The default setting for Tunnels and Trolls is Troll World, which is this game world that has Ken St. Andre and company have been developing consistently over the past 41 years. And you've got a large section of this book devoted to it, devoted to the history of it. You've got some color maps and some paintings in here. Again, I apologize for my lack of good camera work, but I'm working with what I've got. So more about Tunnels and Trolls if you're not familiar with it. I particularly like that Tunnels and Trolls never has really taken itself all that seriously. You can look at the names of the spells, for instance. Take that, you fiend, as one of the classic names of the spells. It's all, a lot of it is tongue-in-cheek. It doesn't have to be in play. You can play it serious if you want, but at its heart, it knows it's a game, and it's telling you it's a game. And Tunnels and Trolls, I should have scripted this, shouldn't I have? Yeah, I'm feeling really geeky right now, because I'm sitting here talking into a camera, and I am unscripted at present. Oh well. So, one of the things that is great about Tunnels and Trolls really is the community. I mean, if you are interested in Tunnels and Trolls, you can find Ken St. Andre, the guy that's been creating this game for 41 years. You can find him via Facebook at Trollhalla. If you look up Trollhalla, the group on Facebook, you can find him and connect with him. He's very gracious to fans like me. He returns emails, gets into conversations and so on and so forth. You can purchase signed items from Ken at a discount via Trollhalla and via his WordPress site. Right now he's got a deal going on for Trollhalla members with dealing with books for each of the magic types of individual types of magic for the races or kindreds in Tunnels and Trolls. There are, as I said, there's a whole lot of expansions within this book. Anything from martial arts to some additional classes. Like there are what are called specialists, which are people who are gifted with a particularly high attribute in any one area. Unlike the classic 5th edition, 1978 edition of TNT, 78-79 edition of TNT, there is a skill system in here. It's called Talents. I particularly like it because it's very open-ended. Basically, a talent gives a character a flat +3 bonus on a given saving throw with regard to that, whatever that activity may be. There are quite a few talents listed in the book, but you can go outside the box. You can make them more detailed or less detailed, however you particularly want to run your game. Another thing that's always been a factor, a part of Tunnels and Trolls additions that really shines through in this one is that they are there's a great weapons illustrated weapons glossary in here of various different weapons. Tunnels and Trolls was noted as the first game to include the chakram, which became famous in the 90s as the weapon of choice for Xena. That's in here. They've included a great deal of Asian weapons, material that originally had been published in the magazine Sorcerer's Apprentice in the 70s. This is really a labor of love. Basically, Kickstarter allowed for Ken St. Andre, Liz Danforth, Jim Bear Peters, and the other people involved to really go back and look over the past, at the time, 3.5, 3 3/4 decades, and say, what do we want Tunnels and Trolls to look like? If we had the budget to make this game what we want, and to have the game that we really want, what would it look like? And that's what they presented here in this book. It is not, compared to your core rule book for something like, compared to the $90 that you may spend for a core set for D&D 5th edition, for instance, it's going to run you less than that, but it's not exactly the hardcover version, which I heartily recommend. I have the softcover version and the hardcover version and the PDF, but yes, I know I'm gushing, aging fanboy, as you can see, but this book, I believe right now at flyingbuffalo.com, www.flyingbuffalo.com, will run you around $60. And I really recommend purchasing directly from Flying Buffalo or from Ken St. Andre personally. I don't think he has copies of the Deluxe Edition rulebook right now. But Rick Loomis, who's the publisher and has been the publisher of Tunnels and Trolls for 40 years, has copies of this book via that website, www.flyingbuffalo.com, and you can pay, thankfully, via PayPal. It's, which is my preferred payment method for just about everything. Another thing is that although Tunnels and Trolls has changed some in its various incarnations, particularly say in the last 10 years, between 7th edition, 7.5, and now Deluxe, there's been some changes made, some changes have come in, but for a long time it was essentially unchanged, but even so, that even with the changes that have come in, all of your Tunnels and Trolls material from the 70s on is still very much usable with the present edition. Tunnels and Trolls, of course, was famous for solo adventures, and so there are a lot of those out there. Ken St. Andre has actually recently produced quite a few new solo adventures and or some reprints of older ones, some revised editions of older ones. So again, those are available on his WordPress site. What else can I say about Tunnels and Trolls? Really, this book, if I were to recommend one hardcover mammoth book, this year or this season, what have you, I would recommend getting this book, because it's, if you like sort of old school fantasy role playing, if you like just looking at the process of the development of a creative endeavor, this book is for you. There are various paintings in here, color paintings of various covers of some of the TMNT rule books, discussions about really the nature of how different things developed in the game, why certain rules were taken out, why certain things were changed, so on and so forth. So you really get to see kind of behind the scenes. They kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, so you can see into the minds of these people that really have been playing this game, conceiving of this game, like I said, for 4 decades. So I would be remiss if I gave this thing an entirely positive review, right? I mean, and again, I apologize for my rambles, but I don't really have a format. Not really done this before, but watched a lot of them on the internet, much of which are better than this. But hey, my my critique, okay, of Tunnels and Trolls, and it's actually a critique of a lot of, um, you know, say old school games, right? There are no ship rules in here, no naval rules in here. Okay, why is that a big deal? Well, it may not be a big deal for a lot of people, and frankly, you can house rule that. You can assign a monster rating to a ship, and just have your ships battle it out, or your conveyances of whatever sort battle it out. In fact, that's not a bad idea, but but I like me some pirates. If you read me this, of course, the book will name various different influences, basis for the archetypes. One of which is Conan for the warrior. Conan did some pirating. Anyway, given my preference, I'd like to see Ken do some naval rules, or some conveyance rules. That to me, again, I apologize for my rhetorical iniquities that you all have been experiencing. I think I would probably not have watched this far into the video myself, given the choice. But anyway, I thank you for your time. Again, check out flyingbuffalo.com, Trollhalla on Facebook. This is a fascinating game. It's a fun game. It's a very rules-like game. In the beginning of the game, the your character sheet could fit on an index card. That really hasn't changed. It's basically it comes from a guy looking at the Fibonacci die matrices in D&D and going, what the heck is this, and coming out with something far more streamlined, and using just your regular 6-sided dice, which were common at the time, and really going from there. And Tunnels and Trolls still, even now, with big companies like Hasbro and other people being involved in the RPG industry, it's still a cottage industry. And in my opinion, some of the best games coming out, some of the most innovative stuff coming out is cottage industry. It's people doing stuff, in their spare time. It's people funding through Kickstarter, and it's people who come to games because they really have a passion for it, and they have a passion for the gaming community. And again, that's one of the best aspects of Tunnels and Trolls, is the gaming community behind it. When nobody was really buzzing about Tunnels and Trolls about 16 years ago, Ken St. Andre started up the Trollhalla, and that really built kind of a grassroots movement for reestablishing Tunnels and Trolls, getting more interest in the game, and so. And it's still very much this kind of grassroots game. So Anyway, I encourage you to pick it up, read about it, and hopefully if I make any more of these videos in the future, which I plan to do, there'll be less scatterbrain. But anyway, thanks for watching. My name is Kurt Meyer, and happy gaming.